This video will show you how to use a sprig mold to attach a design onto a project. So in this case, we're going to be using the sprig molds to make an attachment to one of our two pinch pots. So before you choose which sprig mold set you want to use, there's some things to keep in mind. Choose a design that you like the way it looks, and choose the design that's going to complement your pinch pot. So there's going to be a lot of designs that you can choose from when you get to do yours. Some of them are going to be bigger than others. Some are going to have more detail than others. Some are going to be taller or wider than others. So these are all things you're going to want to think about. And you're also going to want to look at your pinch pot when you're deciding. So I have my pinch pot here, and out of my two pinch pots that I made, this is the pinch pot that I've decided is going to have my sprig mold on it. So I'll show you how to attach the sprig onto it. And then these pinch pots, the ones that we attach the sprig mold to, will be used to practice glazing. So I want to have my pinch pot kind of handy as I am deciding which mold I want to use. So I want to pick something that's going to complement its form and something that's going to fit on there. So there's this bird-like shape here. And if I put my pinch pot next to it, it almost is about the same height as my pinch pot. That's probably not going to be the best option because it's going to make my pinch pot feel heavy. So we don't want these to feel very heavy. So I'm feeling the same way about this large circular shape here. It's just too big for my pinch pot. So that narrows me down to maybe one of these three. Okay, so out of these three, I think I like this one the best. So, and this design probably would go this way. So let me just turn this so we can see it the right way. So I'm seeing the design as it going in this direction. Okay, I'm going to take my pinch pot next to it and just kind of look at the shape of it and the size, and I think that would fit nicely. So in the meantime, once I've picked out my design, I want to put my pinch pot off to the side, maybe wrap it in my bag so it doesn't dry out. And I'm going to get some clay. So if you have extra clay from when you were building your pinch pot, you can use that. Otherwise, see your teacher for a little bit of extra clay. When you get your extra clay, you don't need a whole lot. Start by just kind of squishing the clay in your hands a little bit. This is just going to help wedge the clay, help realign the clay particles, and just kind of get the clay warmed up. Okay. The next thing is I want to kind of flatten this with my hand almost to make a pancake. Okay. Now, once I've made my pancake-like shape, I want to make sure that it's going to be big enough for the mold that I've picked out. So mine needs to be a little bit wider. So I'm going to try to make it about the size or a little bit wider than the mold. Now, you'll notice that as I've been doing that, I'm getting some cracks in my clay. So I have some water here. I'm just going to add some water into my hands because they're starting to dry out. I don't want to drench the clay, but a little bit of water. And then I'm just going to take a few minutes to blend out some of those cracks, because as I try to force the clay into the mold down below, I don't want those cracks to become a part of my design. So those are going to stay in there, and they'll actually stretch out as we go. So I'm just going to take a minute or so just to blend in some of those wrinkles and some of those cracks that have formed in my clay. Okay. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to gently press. See, I think I have that on there wrong. Okay, so you're going to gently press the clay down into the mold. So I'm pressing down and I'm trying to force the clay to fill in the mold. Okay. Okay, so once I've got the clay pressed in there, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start compressing the back of the clay using my rubber kidney. Now, there's a variety of these that you might be using, but they're all pretty much going to do the same thing. So I like to use the curved side of my rubber kidney. If I hold it like this, maybe you can see this side kind of curves down. So I'm going to put that side is what I'm going to be pulling with. So the flat side is up, the curved side is down. And I'm going to start pulling some of the clay off of here. So I'm scraping the clay away. And while I'm doing that, I'm pressing down and pulling towards me. Okay, so this is why you don't want to start with a whole lot of clay, because otherwise you'll be scraping forever. Okay, so I'm just going to take a few minutes. I'm blending, I'm scraping, and I'm trying to scrape away all this extra clay. As you're doing this, you're pressing the clay down into the mold. Just make sure it gets it even. So I like to go from different directions as I'm scraping. Okay, so when you get close, so I'm getting closer, I'm gonna use the flat side of my rubber kidney. I'm just gonna gently go over this a few more times. And I can scrape away some, like where it's not over where my mold was, some of this extra I'll scrape away. You'll see that it's gonna start to show the outside edge of my mold. So that's what I'm trying to get to. So right now I'm just worrying about scraping around the edges. And I'm going to be gentle, especially when I get closer, because I don't want to lose the edges of my shape that I'm trying to create. Okay, so once we have most of this scraped away, you're going to take a little bit of this extra that you just scraped away and just kind of squish it in your hands to create a form. We're just going to use this to help us pull the clay out of the mold. So I'm just going to go like that. It's going to lift. Okay, so it lifted the corner, so I just had the clay pulling. And then I'm just going to carefully pull my design out of the mold. Okay, so this is what I ended up with. So you can see that it took that form. Now, I'm going to move this mold out of the way, and I want to just look at what came out of it. So right now it's looking kind of rough. I'm going to need to clean this up before I attach it onto my project. So there's a couple of tools that we can use to help us clean. We could use a fettling knife if that seems to be the appropriate choice. But for me right now, I have some small details and I have some curves. So I'm going to use a pin tool for mine. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to look a little bit closer and I can see that I have some extra here. So using my pin tool, let's see if I can put this in a way where you can see better. Using my pin tool, I'm going to just follow that edge of where my design was. And I'm going to be careful that I don't accidentally cut off something that I don't want to. Your clay is really soft right now, so keep that in mind as you're cutting. Maybe support while you cut. So I'm going to support my design so I don't lose it. And then I'm going to trim right up next to my design like this. I'm going to look at all of my edges and make sure they're all nice and clean. So this will be a mark of good craftsmanship, and it's also going to make your pinch pot look cleaner. Now, if yours messes up either when you're trimming or when you pull your shape or your form rather out of the mold, you can try again. Okay, so if you don't do it right the first time, there's absolutely nothing wrong with trying again because sometimes we have to learn from our mistakes. Okay, so once I have that cut pretty well, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to do some blending once we attach this onto our pinch pot. So I have my pinch pot right here. The next thing that I'm going to do is I want to decide which side I want this to be on for my pinch pot. So I might hold it up, look at it head on, turn my pinch pot a little bit, kind of play around with how high up I want it to be, how low I want it to be. Do I want it to be in the center? So Let's say that I choose right here, okay? All right, so I'm pretty happy with right there. I'm noticing a little crack that's opening up right there. I can show you how to fix that. I'm kind of glad that that happened, so I can show you how to fix it. All right, now, one thing about your pinch pot is rounded. Okay, so it has a rounded surface like this. And when we pull these out of the mold, they're going to be flat. So the first thing that we want to do once we find its place is we're going to gently press it down so that it's lying flush against the pinch pot. Okay, so that it's going to get a little bit of a curve to it. So if we look at it from the side, we want it to be flush or flat up against all parts. Okay, so we don't want any pieces sticking off the edge. I gotta adjust this just a little bit. Okay, so once we have it placed where we want it, the next step is going to be to trace around our shape. So I'm going to use this scribe tool here. Everybody should have something that looks similar to this with your tools. And I'm just going to lightly carve into my pinch pot just around the edges of this shape. This is going to help me know where I need to score the clay in order to join this on. So I'm just going to take a minute to do that. Okay, so once I have that traced, I'm going to remove my badge here. And you're going to be able to see where to score. So now I know that I need to score within this shape that I've drawn. So I'm going to switch over to my wire scoring tool. And I'm just going to take some time to create some scored surfaces within that outline. And just a reminder, when you're scoring the clay, you want to get it nice and rough so that the slip can really stick on there. All right, so there's one piece, but we always have to make sure that we score both of the pieces that we're joining together. Now, this piece has a curve to it. Can you see how it has a curve? So I'm going to be very careful not to flatten this back out. So when I score this, I'm not going to do it on the table. I'm going to do it in my hand so that I can keep it kind of cupped like this so that it doesn't lose that shape that we created. If we try to bend the clay back and forth too much, it's going to crack on us. So we want to be careful of that. Okay, so once we've scored the clay really well, we're going to add some slip. Okay, so I have my slip brush here, and I'm just going to kind of dab some of the slip onto my scored areas. Don't need to drench it, just enough so that it's filling in the grooves. Add a little bit more to my actual pinch pot. And then I'm going to carefully line it back up. And then gently press. Now, a few things are going to happen as I'm gently pressing. Some of that slip is going to start to ooze out of the seams. So that's good. We want that to happen. Okay. We're going to let that dry a little bit before we do anything else to these. Okay. So while the slip is drying, I'm going to pause here for a second, and then I'll come back once my slip is a little bit more dry, and I'll show you how to finish up and how to fix up some of these surface cracks that may have formed. Okay, so my slip has dried. So if you take a look, you can see that it's no longer super shiny. It's not wet anymore. So I've let it sit for about 10 minutes or so. And now I'm ready to come back and finish up my edges. So the first thing for finishing your edges, you're going to want to use one of your modeling tools. So you have a couple things to choose from. You have one of the modeling tools that might look like this or something similar to that. You also have your scribe tool here that has a thin, smaller modeling tool on the other end. And then some of you might have grabbed one of the small loop tools that has a wooden handle on it, and that can also be used as a modeling tool. So you want to try to find a smaller size or a size that's going to work for your pinch pot. So I'm going to start with this tool here just so I can show you up close how this is going to work. So this is going to be similar to when we put the foot on and we blended our edges. So remember, whenever we score and slip, we also have to blend. So this is the blending part. I'm going to take a little bit of clay. So right here I can see my seam where my two pieces of clay joined together, and it's looking pretty messy right now. So I want to clean that up. It's going to make this look nicer, and it's also going to ensure that it's going to stay on and not pop off during the firing process. Okay, so I'm going to use the curved part of this modeling tool to pull just a little bit of clay, not a lot, from the clay that was in the mold onto my pinch pot. And I'm pressing lightly. I'm not taking big chunks of clay out. I just want to clean up that edge. Okay. So this is what it looks like with the rounded modeling tool. Okay. You can see how that seam is starting to fill in. If I have a lot of straight edges, I might want to use one of the more straight modeling tools. Okay. Because these are round though, because our pinch pots are round, those straight modeling tools are a little bit more difficult to work with. So keep that in mind. And if your modeling tool is not working very well, we do have some extras that we can talk about swapping out one for another. All right, so once I've gone in and I've gotten rid of that seam and cleaned it up, there's one more step. So we're going to go in with our stiff blending brush at this point. So you should have a bucket of water at your table. You're just going to clean off your brush in the bucket, and then on your placemat, you want to blot this off. And remember, the slip is different than the water. We don't want to use slip to do this. We want to use water and then the long-handled stiff blending brush, okay? So then I'm going to go in with my damp blending brush. I'm just going to blend my seam. It's a little bit too much water, so I'm going to pull some of that off. So I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to blend. So you're almost like painting with it. What that's going to do is it's going to smooth out the edge and clean everything up. Okay, so I would continue that same process all the way around every part of where I attached this. Okay, so I'm not going to have you watch me do that whole thing. I think you can get the gist of it by what I showed you over here. Okay, but I would make sure to do the bottom and all the way around. Now, if you have some surface cracks that you're dealing with, as long as they're not spread everywhere and we just have a few to deal with, we can manage those. So little cracks like this, what I like to do is I take a little bit of slip, and not a lot. So I just have a little slip container here. I'll show you guys real quick. So my little slip container, and I have my brush wet, but I'm getting most of the slip off of there. And then I just want to get a little bit of slip on where my cracks are. So I'm just trying to fill those in with a little bit of slip. For this bigger crack here, I'm actually going to go in with my scoring tool, my wire scoring tool, and I'm going to score that crack. So I'm just kind of going back and forth, creating some X's there. I might do the same thing on this one here. Then I'm going to use my stiff blending brush. So I did get kind of a lot of slip on there. I'm just going to take a paper towel that I have sitting here and maybe absorb some of the slip off of there. I'm not going to rub it. I'm just kind of blotting at it. So that way it doesn't take over. It can take too long to dry. All right, so I'm going to go in with my stiff blending brush. And I want to make sure that it's clean and again, not soaking wet. And I'm just going to take a little bit of time to blend in where that crack was. Kind of clean it up. And they should disappear. Okay, and you can go ahead and do that on any little surface cracks that you have. If your cracks are really deep, so if your surface cracks are really deep, that could be an issue. You can bring it to me and I can look at it, but you can use this stiff blending brush to blend out any irregularities that you may have within your mold. Just be careful that you don't lose your design. So we still want to make sure that we have the texture and that we can see the pattern of your mold. Okay. At this point, this one is almost done. My clay right now, because I had to attach, is at soft leather hard. Okay, so it's still kind of squishy. I want to let this dry to dry leather hard. Once it's to dry leather hard, I can carve my name on the bottom. And we'll talk about carving our name on the bottom in a different video. But I would then wrap this one in dry paper towel. So when you wrap in dry paper towel, I have some here. Let me just show you really quickly. You want to make sure that the entire pinch pot is wrapped. So I'm going to take my dry paper towel and wrap it around my whole pinch pot. And then I'm just going to take the extra paper towel and kind of stuff it up inside my pinch pot like that. Okay, and that's going to help absorb some of the moisture out of the clay. And then this whole pinch pot is going to go back in my bag. Now, at this point, my foot is probably strong enough to hold the weight of my pinch pot, but I still think it's a good idea to keep these on the rim just because they might get knocked around within the cabinet. And if it's sitting on its foot, there's a better chance that it's going to fall over and get flattened. So let's keep them stored on the rim still. We're still going to put them in our bag because we don't want them to dry out to bone dry, okay? Just want to get them to dry leather hard. I'm going to tuck my bag around there, put this away, and then I'll be ready to carve my name next class. That's all. Thank you.